Hi, I'm Roma Hooper. I'm the director and founder of Make Justice Work, which is a campaign raising awareness around the cost and ineffectiveness of short-term prison sentences and in favour of looking at the value of community sentencing. Of course, at the moment, I think the jury is out about how effective it actually is being, because there's only the 2 pilots that are running presently. However, our focus is on community sentencing, and yes, I think in principle there are lots of very positive signs around payment by results having real value for those involved with community sentencing. I think there are some real challenges which we're all very, very aware of, and I'm sure you're going to ask me about those. But we've just done this report called Just Results, okay, and it's been a very useful exercise in terms of understanding what are the core criteria that should sit within a payment by results model for community sentencing. And what is very clear, and we have evidenced this through the 30 people who came along to share this event for the day, that if we're really going to make it work for offenders, you've got to listen to the offender. Okay, so there's something about procedural justice which recognises the voice of the offender and the victim, because I think we need to take both of those into account. And clearly the other benefits for the offender is that the focus is on what works. So, the intention is hopefully that they'll start delivering programs. I mean they in a very generic way, because we don't know yet who they're going to be, but actually that they will fit the bill and actually enable some reoffending to really happen. I think that's a real key question. I think innovation must be very, very important in all of this, because if you lose that, you lose the opportunity to be a bit out of the box. It's very much how the commissioning is structured. If we don't get that right and we squeeze innovation out, there's some real problems there. So my absolute bottom line is the commissioning. If we can sort that out and put the processes in place where we'll allow innovation, and in a way the whole point about payment by results was set up. I remember Ken Clark saying, I don't care how you do it, just do it. Well, you've got to enable that to happen. You've got to provide the space for that to happen. It's the focus on outcomes. We've lived through tick boxing for far too long, and I think everybody across the board, whether it's police, magistrates, probation, the voluntary sector, have all been focusing on tick boxing. If you do that, that's the answer. Well, it's not. And so the real key is if you can get those outcomes right. The real challenge, though, I think, which is facing the team at the moment who are developing payment by results, is do we go binary? Do we go flexible? Which way do you go? And I think that if you use the binary measure, it could be too crude, and you'll lose out on the opportunity to understand and value the journey that offenders go on. They're not people you can just turn on and off. They often have very chaotic lives, as in general most people live very complicated lives, however simple we may think we live. There's not often a very simple answer. So I think in the way of providing that fluidity within the outcomes is really important, but there is no doubt that the principle behind looking at what works has to be the way forward. But there are going to be stumbling blocks. There are going to be people who will, work the system to make it suit them financially. And I think there's an issue ethically around how the private sector engage. That this is not about profit. This is about profit for the public, actually, and the most important profit has to be for the victim. So I think if we can concentrate on what works for the victim and satisfies them, whilst at the same time achieving a really, what I would call, whether we like it or not, we have to take a holistic approach to an offender. There's no one single measure that you need to apply to make it suitable for them, to be motivated to reduce their offending behaviour or to stop altogether. I think the report, Just Results, is very clear about the concerns. And I've already mentioned one, which is the binary measure. The other one is an interesting thing around pace, because there's two sides to this. And as you will all be aware now, the landscape has now changed. We have a new Justice Minister who has suspended all the pilots, other than the two that are already going. And I suspect he's going to want to roll it out much more quickly. So any sense that it's a pilot is gone, which means that there's no real time to gain from the learning. And I think there is an issue around that. But at the same time, if we don't get this whole thing going, then those voluntary sector agencies, which we so value and need to be part of this, will actually be losing funding and may not be there in 2 years' time. So it's a real fine balance, but if you don't recognise one with the other, then I think we've got a problem. Obviously the binary measure needs to be thought about. And I think it's about how to create a level playing field. And that's very much how the commissioning is structured. You have to provide a process where the smaller voluntary agencies aren't squeezed out. Critically, the payment mechanism must work for those organisations that are going to get involved. It is very different for a large private sector organisation to be able to afford to take on a risk of non-payment of what they will get from the reward of reducing the reoffending in a year's time. Voluntary sector agencies can't do that. A lot of companies can't do that. So we have to look at a fair and transparent payment mechanism that enables people to come in and be part of the game. I think it will. I mean, we see it already happening in other parts of the system. And in fact, only just today, there was something in the paper about troubled families and councils commissioning out payment by results. So I think it is the way forward. I think it's the way to sharpen service deliverers' work. It's a way which slightly concerns me about taking accountability away from government, and I'm not entirely sure whether that's the right way forward. Critically, there's a lot of issues around cherry picking and gaming that we need to address. But I think that there's enough people out there saying very similar things to us and sharing it with those that are developing the commissioning process, that hopefully one has to be optimistic that they're going to get it right. But at the moment, it's the only game out there until we start getting ourselves back out of this ghastly austerity issue. We have to be very careful to balance it, I think. I think that would be caution, would be my word, but I think yes, it is what is going to happen.